Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody. This is the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance joint meeting for the Board of Education budget. We will have Erica and Marianne do the presentation, and then after that we will take questions. And when we do take questions, we'll be going in our round table, one question per person until there are no more questions. So I'm turning over to you guys to get started. Thank you.
That's no problem.
Will you have it for the rest?
Good evening. My name is Erica Gelvin, and I am the chair of the Clinton Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to present the board's proposed operating budget, the result of many months of diligent and difficult work on the part of the Board of Education. Before I introduce the product of that labor, I would like to publicly acknowledge the professional, collegial work done by each member in the vetting and shaping of this budget. You did your research, asked challenging questions, and made difficult decisions to ensure that the proposed budget reflects what is necessary to provide integral programming as identified by administrators, teachers, parents, students, and other stakeholders. You have all honored and exemplified the mission of the Clinton Public Schools, empowering learners to embrace and influence the future with courage and compassion. Our work over the past year, budgetary and otherwise, was largely guided by two overarching questions. Number one, are we maximizing efficiencies in the utilization of our resources? And number two, are we staffed appropriately given the realities of education and enrollment, not just today, but in the years to come? Our presentation, in addition to the information we've provided in our budget book, will take you through our process and answer these questions. But before I turn it over to Marianne, I would like to walk you through a bit of the background behind our process and some of the great work occurring in our school community every day. The work of the Board of Education, as well as the district as a whole, is guided by 5 strategic priorities. These beacons have been informed by the expertise of our administrators, the feedback of our constituency, and a strategic planning process put in place last year and continuing over the next 2 years to ensure that our vision and the steps to achieve it are clear to all stakeholders. What does this strategic plan look like? In part, it covers these 4 priorities. We feel strongly that adhering to these principles is critical to maximizing the effectiveness and fiscal efficiency of our schools. So what is happening in our schools? Here are some great examples. So in our classrooms, we see honors level work at Elliott Middle School. We see AP early college level work at our high school. We see engaged learners at Pierson, and we see rapt attention among our kindergartners. This is a large part of who we're doing this work for. I would like to call your attention to a few things. The first of which is our connection to science and our import of having a strong science curriculum for our students. I'd also like to call your attention to our strong commitment and dedication to our tech ed offerings, both in terms of culinary arts, in terms of woodworking, tech ed in general, design projects, things like that, and other innovative uses of resources in our classrooms to really allow our students to engage in the work that we're asking them to do. These are some of our other experiences that I think many people are not really aware of because they don't occur in a classroom setting in a traditional sense. This is, what do they call it, deconstruction day? This is part of our invention convention process where our students actually take things apart to figure out how the pieces should go together in new and innovative ways to create new things. Obviously, you've probably been aware of our musical theater offerings. Look at those little faces. They're very happy children. This is our Project Adventure experience, which is really kind of a benchmark of our elementary school experience here in Clinton. This is part of the reason they're all in red. This is our STEP program. which we are very proud of at Morgan School, which allows our incoming freshmen to be oriented to the high school experience so that they come in confident, comfortable, and prepared. Obviously, this is the class of 2022. Yeah. And this is our guitar rock, is that what it's called? Guitar rock music class, which if you like rock, guitar, contemporary music, check them out. They're quite talented and they really enjoy this class a great deal. And, you know, we're also very aware that what happens within our walls isn't limited to our walls, within our walls. That we're part of the community and we have to really, it's important to instill in our students that connection to the community around them. So we have Monster Mash, which is a Halloween celebration at Joel's school that is really targeted for Joel students, but anybody in our community can come and participate in that. This is when we had Sandy Hook Promise come and talk to our students about understanding the warning signs for potential dangerous activity and decisions in our schools, because we know that prevention is the best thing we can do to keep our students safe. We have a wonderful partnership with Partners in Community. I'm sorry for the pun. You know, and we really have kind of built some very nice bridges between what our students need within our classrooms and what they need from the community as a whole. Obviously, our Fire Safety Week is a huge deal. Kids at Joel in particular get very excited for that time of year when they can learn and practice their skills for keeping safe. This is, for anyone who had a chance to experience this event in the past, this is our 100th day celebration at Joel, where our Joel students gather supplies and money and other things to support various organizations in town, again, expanding their influence well outside of our school community. And this is a food drive that obviously has the same impact for supporting those around us. And these are just some examples of really the greatness that is contained in our schools. This was a marine science class where they had to design a boat. And it's just cardboard and, bless you, and they had to take it out off Avery Point, I believe it was, and race it. So it was a tremendous effort in engineering, it was a tremendous effort for marine science and awareness, things like that. This is another example of our great invention convention work, which has had to do with, we've seen some of our students participate on the national level, compete on the national level. Obviously, our Morgan sports are outstanding. I don't know if any of you like basketball, but our basketball teams are doing quite well, so they're playing tonight. This is two of our award winners from Elliott Middle School that were recognized for their leadership and scholarship. And this is, of course, a picture of last year's commencement. So these are just some of the kind of great things that we have going on in our schools that aren't reflected in the budget book or in our presentation tonight. Thank you for your commitment to proper and responsible funding of our schools. Clinton is on the rise, and we are all part of that process. I would now like to turn the floor over to Marion O'Donnell, Superintendent of Clinton Public Schools, to walk you through some highlights of the Board of Education proposed budget.
Is it my understanding that we're not to ask questions during the presentation?
Yes, we're going to wait for questions after we're done.
You won't cut it off at the end to allow us to ask as many questions as we like?
Yes.
Last year I felt like we kind of got cut off after a couple of go-arounds.
We will keep going around until we're all done, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to share our budget. Erica gets the happiness and the joy and the excitement of what we do to share those community connections, what our learners experience, and how our staff really creates opportunities. And it's important to lead with that because the rest of this is numbers and details, and that's the difficult work you all have to do and that our Board of Ed had to do and our administration had to do leading up to tonight. So I'm going to try and make sense of a lot of detailed information. You all had a chance, or hopefully had a chance, and have received the budget book. And I just want to take a second I'm going to reference it a couple times tonight, so if you don't have it with you, maybe a neighbor does, and you can look at some of the sections, because there's lots of information in here, including every line item detail, and I'll reference some of it. But tonight I'm going to look a little bit more and discuss with you a little bit more about our process and arriving at the numbers. There's a lot of things that were happening for us as a Board of Education and the school system this year. I'm going to share some of that, and then how we got to the numbers we got based on those things that are happening. And if I'm lucky, we won't have any questions at the end, but I know we'll have plenty. And hopefully I can answer all those tonight, and if I can't, I will provide that information tomorrow. So I share this slide partly because this year was unique for us. The first piece really is the strategic plan adoption, and that happened this summer after about a year and a half of work of really evaluating where the district was and where we needed to go, what needs we had, what were our weaknesses. We surveyed staff, we surveyed our community and our parents to try to determine what it is they were looking for in the Clinton Public Schools. And all of that came together into a 3-year strategic plan. And I note this partly because in the back of your budget book, the strategic plan, our 3-year strategic plan is back there with detailed initiatives, and all of this is a culmination of that work. So that really began to define the questions and the work we did with our budget this year. Secondly, in the orange is our facilities committee decision. And as many of you know, last March, the board embarked on a facilities committee with a variety of stakeholders to really look at the space and programs we had in the district and how we would make best use of those facilities while maximizing efficiencies. And that work was ongoing and wasn't culminated until November. We begin our budget process pretty much when we get back to school in September. So we had our strategic plan, but we were still working through this facilities decision, which clearly was going to have major impact on our budget. So that decision came in November. In October, beginning of October, we began officially with each of the cost center budgets. And those cost center budgets represent each of our schools, and they're developed with our teachers and our principals. We also have cost centers for our other support services. So we have a special ed cost center, or special services cost center, maintenance. We have district-wide that covers all of the things that support our schools and our programming and our operations. And then we have an athletics. So we have 8, now we're going to have 7 cost centers, but they're all in here behind the tab that says request by cost center, and it outlines each one of them and every detailed line item. And then behind that, those detailed line items have request sheets that add up to those amounts. So our budgeting process is really a line item. It's built from the ground up with specific requests. We look at trend data and evaluation of what's happened in the past, what we know going forward, and we really fine tune those. So what you see here are detailed line items for each cost center coming to a total amount, but each of those line items has backup as well. And so I have some detail, there'll be questions tonight, but where I'm going to focus tonight is a little bit on the broader scale once we get into the numbers. So those were being developed in our buildings while we waited for the decision on facilities. And that decision, as I shared, was made in November, and I'm sure everybody here knows that the decision was made to close the Pierson School. We decided to move the 4th grade to Joel Elementary School, and Joel is going to become next year a pre-K through 4, and we decided to move 5th grade to Elliott Middle School to become a 5A middle school. In doing so, there's a lot that needed to happen, and we had to discuss what the timeline would be for that move. And the committee felt strongly that they made the recommendation to the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed agreed that we could make this happen in the 2019-20 school year. It's requiring a lot of work and a lot of investment in determining budget and transition, but we felt that we could do it, and we felt that we were ready to do it, and it was the right thing to do, both for programming, for the district, and for the town. All of those things were coming together to create our budget. So as we were forming the budget with that in mind, these were bullets, the first 3 we've talked a little bit about, right? What's in our strategic plan and what have we identified that we need to make sure we're embedding in our budget? when we reorganize these schools, what are the changes in programming, what are the needs that need to happen. Closing Pierson, we'll be carrying that building for about half the year, so we needed to determine what costs we would need to maintain at the building before we turn it over to the town, and we needed to budget for those costs, both to maintain the building, to finish out and close out systems and whatever needed to happen, as well as return it the way that the town needed it to be returned so that they could then pursue options for the building. So all of that needed to get determined and factored in to this budget, and it is. So what we present tonight does contain all of those costs. And then the fourth one is an ever-present one, and I mention it specifically because I'm going to talk about it tonight. But health insurance has been a huge driver of our budget, and it's been a frustration for me because the increases that we've experienced in health insurance since I came into the superintendency have been 10%, 16%, and this year we're facing a 14% increase. And health insurance increases are based primarily on claims rates and experience, which we've struggled with in Clinton. We're part of a collaborative, and it's supposed to balance that out, and it has a little, but we've had a lot of high claims, and that has impacted our rate. The other piece is the state of healthcare in Connecticut and in the nation, and the rise in costs that are associated with it anyway. So that last year, right as we passed the budget, we have been looking at that and studying it. And in June, the board voted and made a recommendation to explore other options for health insurance other than the health collaborative that we're currently part of. We just felt the rise in costs were there, and we needed to see if there was a better more cost-effective option. And so that began in June of last year, a little bit of work on our part ahead of time, but we've been working with the board since then. I'm going to share with you tonight where we stand. It's not, we don't have everything finalized, but there is still some potential for some savings. So what I present to you tonight is status quo, but I think there's real potential, and we should know that in a time frame that will allow the Board of Finance to make some decisions before public hearing and before the referendum. So I will talk a little more about it. But those were four big things in addition to budgeting that were going on that we needed to address. Erica mentioned the strategic plan. I've mentioned it. The implications for the budget is really the bullet I want to share with you, and that's related to math programming, which has been identified 3 years ago as an area we really needed to focus on, K through 12. And so you're going to see that there are some math materials. It links to our strategic initiatives and what the data is showing us for needs curricularly. So there are some materials there, and then there's some materials for curriculum development, training, and curriculum writing, which are linked to our high school accreditation process. And we're beginning that process. We'll have a visit in a year, and we need to renew our accreditation, and there are some expectations. So there's a little bit of increase or money, and I'll show you where it is, related to the curriculum development, the writing, and the training for that. The next big thing is the district reorganization. And I mentioned we did decide on the structure of our grade levels. We have been spending the last few months, and we have a timeline on our website if you want to take a look at it, to determine the grade level and teaming structures, our schedules, and the related programming that we were going to offer, and any adjustments we needed to make. And then with consolidation, what are the real staffing needs? And what could we see some savings in, and what did we need in order to realign our schools was all part of this conversation. I mentioned the closing of Pierson and really doing a detailed cost analysis for the idea that even though we closed Pierson, we closed the building, but all of our children and those teachers are going to other schools, and with them are the supplies and materials that go with those students. So identifying what needs to transition, and then where we could have consolidation of services and equipment and supplies and staffing as a result by not operating a fourth building or a fourth school. And then I mentioned the closeout of the building. And I will note, because we won't spend a lot of time on it tonight, but within your budget book, under Budget Adjustments tab, I have a couple slides on this, but later you can take a look at it if you haven't already. We tried to show how we were redistributing costs and what we could pull as a cost savings. So we've given you that information. I'll talk about it tonight, but it's there in your budget book if you need it. So let's talk a little bit about the closing of Pierson before we jump into where we landed with our objects and our budget itself. So one of the things we needed to do was to look at transition costs. And when the original study was done to look at our facility needs, and I think it was published in 2014, what was posited at that point was we needed to do destruction and rebuilding and renovation and add-on classrooms, and it was going to cost millions and millions of dollars to do those projects. We went into this thinking that's not necessary. Where we are now with our enrollment and our spaces and what has been maintained well in our 2 schools, it would not require a major renovation at this point to do the transition, and that was part of the work the facilities committee did. So the transition costs really that we see, we know at this point in time that we've factored into the budget, and really the only place we've factored it in is capital, as you can see the last line of the table. These are the things that we will need to have or expend in order to make this transition. So our goal was to make the transition with as limited an investment as necessary to have quality programs, to provide for our kids and make sure our facilities at Joel and Elliott could meet the needs. So these are the costs. We've estimated approximately $25,000 in moving costs to be able to relocate everything and do the moves that we have to do in our buildings. There's moves within our schools at Elliott and Joel of classroom movements and reorganizing program, and then there's obviously the move of Pierson over to the other schools, the materials that need to go. There are 2 adjustments at Elliott that need to happen. One is in the art room. We need to be able to divide the room, and it's a kind of a double room. It used to have a divider door, and we're looking at options for that, but we do need to install a sink so that we can create 2 instructional spaces, and we are going to relocate the newer kiln from Pierson over to Elliott, so that it's a piece of equipment that's newer than the one that's been at Elliott, so there's some costs associated with that. At Joel, we're looking to be able to divide the gym so that we have options in the way that we can utilize that space and not just have one class at a time. We can divide it and have multiple things going on there. And we also are looking at that because of the way that the gym is used for park and rec and for community events. We think that will help give not only our instructional side, but potentially community use of it, more opportunity in that Joel gym. So those are the costs that we need to do, and we believe that we can do that. We've been knowing these were coming, we've kind of tightened some things, held off on some things, and we think we can pay for these things out of our 18-19 operating, this current year budget. So we're not looking for anything, you won't see those costs in the new budget that we're requesting. The only cost that is there is this Elliott network wiring and switch upgrade. Now that we're adding the additional class to Elliott and we're infusing Chromebooks, we don't have the capacity in the building to meet the needs that we need. This was actually in last year's capital, and it was cut from the capital. We had hoped to potentially use the security grant money that came into the town potentially for this. That went into the undesignated fund. So you see it here in our capital, and it's a project that has to happen in transition. It is one of the key pieces in our capital that really needs to stay, or we need to do. So let's talk the cost savings, and I will reference that tab in your book, and page 40 or 29. I can't see, it's a little 49 and 50 outlines this, so it's similar, and then it gives detail. But in a snapshot, we have estimated our cost savings to be $834,841. So those cost savings are in the following areas: personnel for a total of $429,870. Operational costs that are in the Pierson school, so it's pens and pencils and instructional supplies, some of which has to be reassessed, some of it we can contain. Photocopying expenses, because we don't need to move the machines or lease them anymore. So it's those kinds of things that we're able to save in the operational costs. The maintenance line, there is repairs and maintenance, there's maintenance for the building, there's custodial supplies. That $49,254 includes the savings we have in maintenance just at Pierson. Then we have district-wide, and that's another big number. That's all of our utilities, savings from Pierson. It's benefits for the reduction in staff, so we don't need to pay out benefits if we're reducing staff. And then there are some contracted services like trash and hauling. We're really not saving much in our contract because the kids are going to create more trash in the other schools, but those kinds of things. Fire extinguisher contract, we have small savings because now we don't have to do it at Pierson, even though it's a smaller school. So that's where the savings are coming from, and on page 50, it shows you kind of what got reallocated, what got saved in the Pierson cost center, and then you can see some of these reductions in the other cost centers if you take a look. And I'm happy to sit and share more if we, anyone's interested. So that begs the question. If we're saving $834,000, almost $835,000 in closing Pierson, how on earth can we have an increase? And I'm sitting here tonight and we have a board-approved budget with a small increase. So there are a couple things that the next slide is to kind of show you why. And I did this for the Board of Ed. I did this for myself to say, where are we really at? And when we started our budget process in January, when you first put it all together and you roll up all the salaries and you look at health insurance costs with the renewal rate that they give you, anything new that we're doing, any other reductions, we usually start in the 5 to 6% range in January, and then we get tighter numbers and we push on contracts and we figure things out. And quite frankly, in the last 3 years, we've done a lot of consolidation that has allowed us to reduce staff. And so we've done that again this year in closing Pierson. So as you look at this table, if we just took our current staff and did the contracted salary increases, the increase would be what you see there on the screen, $750, $186. If you roll up our employee benefits costs with the 14% health insurance increase, that number is there. And then you add the cost for increases for new program items, increases in contracts that we have, right? Everything goes up 2%, 3%, 1% here and there. You get that third number. So overall, all in, just if we just rolled the budget and went forward, it would be a $1.5 million increase. So the next slide shows what we did in order to get where we are. So the reductions from closing Pierson are listed there. And then in every other line item of trying to find cost containment, things like photocopying across the district, we just went out to bid and we saved a significant amount of money. Things like pushing back on contracts we had in for fuel and utility, looking at our trending. One of the areas in electricity, we have savings at Pierson, but we also have some savings because we've been tightening the HVAC controls and systems at Morgan and really getting a much better operational experience there, which has realized over the last 3 years the cost for electricity at Morgan has come down. So it's all of those other things. The net reduction of everything else is about $99,000, which takes us to where we are. So where we stand and what was approved by the board unanimously and what you have in front of you in this budget book is a proposed operating budget or Board of Ed approved operating budget of $33,211,486, which represents a 1.7% increase or $554,812. The next slide is a representation of objects, of the whole budget by object. So I'm going to ask you to turn to the tab that says Request by Object, and it's page 15 in your budget book, because the rest of the presentation is kind of going to use this context to give you some background and understanding of where the increases are and what's happening. It's page 15 in your budget book. And I show you page 15 first because 15 and 16 take each of these objects and it explains what's in them. So we look at our budget a couple of ways. One is cost center by cost center, line item by line item. What this does is it takes similar things in each cost center and it clusters them together and it says this is how much it costs for the whole budget. Right? So rather than looking at every line item and jumping around from school to school, it takes certified salaries. All of our certified staff members in all of the cost centers in our budget are together, and this is how much it costs for that. Right? And it does that for each of them. But for some of them, it's a little counterintuitive what's actually included in it, like certified salaries is easy. Transportation is pretty easy to understand what that object represents, but something like professional technical services, that's an amalgam of a whole bunch of things throughout the budget. So I reference this page because it gives you a description of what's in that object, okay? And I go back to it every year to double check, like, wait, why is that going up? And you see where these pieces are coming from. So that's the explanation. So where I want you to kind of stay for the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, is on page 17 with the object table. So on page 17, this object table shows you the final 18-19 budget in the first column, well, second column. Then it shows you what was approved for this year by the Board of Ed. Then it shows you what the amount changes, and that's where people's eyes go to, right? Then you look at the percent change, which could be really high, and it's only a $1,000 increase. So you have to kind of put the two together. I think the amount change is a better one, just to really see dollar to dollar. And then the last column is the percent of total budget, so how much of the budget it makes. So this graph, this pie chart, shows you the amounts for each of these objects, how it represents the whole budget. And clearly, what really stands out in this, and the reason I show it and we contain it here, is that we are a people-driven business. And you can see the blue and the orange are our salaries and our benefits. And if you look at the table, the salaries and benefits make up 80.47% of our budget. Our budget is about people. And when our increases in the last 3 years, our increases are in people and benefits, despite the fact that we have reduced staff and consolidated things. So this really visually helps you do that. The next one is to say, where is the increase coming from? So our increase that's in this approved budget is $554,812. So in that amount change column at the bottom, that's the total increase. And this pie chart shows you where it's coming from. $409,594 is basically health insurance, employee benefits. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Which is why the board embarked on that last June, and we have some changes, and we have the potential to see some significant savings at that line. And if you recall, when I showed you the salaries line, if we did nothing and just rolled up based on contracted amounts, it was about $750,000. So that salary line has been offset and contained quite a bit. But our increase for salaries now is the $77.51. Okay. So now I'm going to look at, as you look at this amount change column, there's increases and decreases in just about all but one. I'm going to look at the big increases. Okay? So the objects that are increasing in this budget that are resulting in the $540,000 increase are listed on this slide. And I'm going to give you just a little background about each one. Hopefully answer some questions ahead of time, and then maybe prompt some more questions as you want to understand more. So the first one is our certified salaries. These are our teachers. They require licensure for the roles that they play. Our teachers, our school psychologists, social workers, administrators, anyone that requires a teaching license or an administrative license. And that line item is increasing $316,234, or 2%. That includes, or takes into account, all of the contractual increases that exist, as well as the reductions or additions that exist. And we do have one addition. And one addition is a board-certified behavior analyst. And that person is someone who works with our students with severe needs. And in this case, it would be for students with emotional needs, behavioral needs, and diagnoses under special ed. The goal here, we have one on staff, and we're looking to add the second. And this position truly offsets the need to sometimes place students in out-of-district placements, which many of you who have been part of this know, and I have a chart in here to let you look at it. that placement could be anywhere from $90,000 to $150,000 for a student if they need to be placed out of the district, and then sometimes have additional transportation costs. So one staff member can offset that, and we've had success with the one we have to really be able to provide quality programming for kids with severe needs in district, because we have the expertise of this person. And so we're looking to add the other one to address some needs, and we think, and we have seen it, that will allow us to program in district for several of our students, and it's very much a cost-effective approach. It's a position we have to have here in district. The reductions, we have one administrative reduction with the closing of Pierson. We're reducing a principal. So we'll have one fewer administrator, and then we're reducing in consolidation 3 teaching positions. They are at the middle school and high school level, and we have 3 total certified staff positions that are decreasing this year. So let's talk a little bit about the employee benefits object. So on this, it says employee benefits, and it shows you a $409,594 increase. This, remember I told you, and I think I have the slide coming up, that the increase in health insurance alone is 14%, but we can offset that with the reduction in some staff members who won't be with us, and therefore we don't need to offer the insurance benefits. So we factor that into our increase, so the increase is much smaller, it's 6%. This does include not just health insurance though, it includes the non-certified pension contribution, which we have, as well as some other employee benefits. So the next slide shows you the components of that object. And these are, their numbers, the pension, the Social Security are numbers that are given to us based on where we stand, and valuations actuarially. Workers' comp is another one that, is given to us in terms of an increase. And then the employee medical I'm going to talk about on the next slide. So our health insurance, I believe I mentioned that right now we're facing a 14% renewal increase. That continues to get adjusted where it normally is finalized in April. But that's where we're trending right now, and that's what we budgeted for. I mentioned the decision to explore some other alternatives. We've been doing that, analyzing what the cost savings might be. Those are all part of our health insurance benefits, are part of our contracts. So they have to undergo collective bargaining rules in order to make a change to health insurance. And so that's part of what this process has been, to be able to work with each of the groups to explore these and then to make the needed changes within the contracts to allow for change. So we are in process, and we're very hopeful that we'll see that, and if we do, we're going to have significant savings. So that's the green. There's very strong potential for a significant reduction in this budgeted cost. And we should know that very soon, in the next couple of weeks. Professional technical services object. So this one is increasing by $110,498. These are the components really that are contributing to that increase. And I included the column that says cost center because they're not all in one place, right? The cost center 5 is our special services cost center. Cost center 8 is our district-wide cost center, which you'd be jumping around in the budget book. So I kind of consolidated it here so you know why it's going up. Every other year, there are actuarial service requirements for GASB to do analysis. That's a new mandate, and that $24,465 is really the differential. Next year, it won't be that much, and then the following year, we'd have to do it again. So that increase is related to that. The professional services for the handicap is a complex conversation, but I want to share with you. It says grant adjustments. So a year ago, the legislature passed that all districts need to establish a process where we ask for reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement for services that we provide to eligible services that we provide to students within our schools. So some of those eligible services are counseling services, our social workers can sometimes claim some things, our school psychologists, as well as our occupational therapy and physical therapy individuals. If they provide qualifying services under the individualized education plan, we can create the system, we apply for reimbursement for qualifying services, and those reimbursements now come back to the town, to the Board of Ed, to the town. So we started that last spring. We got that underway when the legislation passed. We started last spring, and I included a little bit of that in the budget book and what we anticipate. But in order to maximize that, you cannot claim reimbursement if the person is being paid out of a federal grant. And we get a federal grant called IDEA, it's in here. So if we had a school psychologist or occupational therapist that we were paying for out of grant money from the federal government, then they consider it double dipping. We can't ask for reimbursement. So what we did was we moved about 4 people around, moved them out of the grant so that we could claim more, and we moved people in who can't claim their services into the grant. But there's about 5 different line items where people have moved, and it's really, I have a chart and I can show you how that happened. But ultimately, this increase is due to moving occupational therapy contracted services into the regular budget, moving a behavior technician into the grant, and the increase is shown in this line. But we're hopeful that we can now ask for reimbursement for those services and that we can increase the revenue back to the town related to Medicaid. Long-winded, hopefully made a little bit of sense. But I have a lot more information about that, but there's a couple of those changes, and then you try to track, well, if you move this here, where's the offset? And I have it. But remember, we also have 1 new position, so it's complex. But I have a chart that can show you that. Our goal, the ultimate story is we're trying to increase revenue back and offset our costs. And doing it this way, we should glean more reimbursement that will come back to the town to offset the budget cost. Transportation object. If you look, we have 6 transportation lines. 5 transportation lines. We have 2 in our special services. 1 is for special ed in town, 1 is for special ed out of town for students that we have to transport out of district. And then we have 1 in our regular district-wide budget for regular transportation. And then we have another one for vinyl BOE transportation that we're required to provide by law. So they're represented on this slide because if you look at one of them, if you look at special ed in town, it's decreasing by 61. If you look at regular transportation, it's increasing by 58. That is simply accounting for the buses in the right categories. And again, this goes to state reporting. They require you to report special ed costs versus regular ed costs. So we need to budget appropriately, and so if I have 1 extra bus that's servicing special ed students and 1 less bus servicing regular ed, I have to adjust for that. So you see the first 2 lines basically cancel each other out because all we did was move a bus from one line to the other. The special ed out of town is bolded because that's where the increase is. In our tuition line, you'll see an increase. We're budgeting for 1 additional student who is anticipated to be out of district placed. And then this special ed out of town transportation is related to that student as well as another student who was outplaced this year that we needed to provide transportation. So that's the fluid nature of the out of district placements and how it impacts this. But the reason for the increase in this object is the special ed out of town transportation. I guess I'll mention too that the transportation object without that increase was only going up $2,000. And we went out to bid last year for our transportation contract, and it really kind of shifted and re-normed our transportation. But we had a projected 3% increase in transportation costs, but we were able to offset that by reducing buses and changing runs a little bit this year and consolidate. So really there's no increase in our regular busing routes. It's the special ed out of town. Our textbook object gets to our strategic plan and the math curriculum implementation materials. We are piloting the K-5 math program Bridges, and we have money in here. This increase relates to getting materials for the remaining classrooms, K through 5 for this math program. We've had great results so far. We've been tracking, we have data to measure its effectiveness, and so it's for full implementation, as well as our advanced math classes at the high school. We are looking to offer an advanced math and a statistics class in addition to AP Calculus. And so there's a little bit of textbook money to support that. The bulk of that object increase, though, is the math K-5 program, and then our high school textbooks and civics. And I guess I need to mention that this is a 3-year decision. So we started 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, really evaluating our scores, our trends, researching programs, looking at what our shortcomings were with our current program, which K-5 is about 9 years old, 8 years old now, and what the new assessments are asking, what we want for our kids. And so it wasn't just let's buy this new textbook. It truly is a process that we have before we make decisions like this. And then the civics textbook is about 12 years old and needs replacement at this point. And that's a small amount, but it's in the high school textbook line. Oops. Okay. So I mentioned the tuition. We are required to pay tuition for certain programs that students choose to attend. We don't pay tuition for Vinyl Technical School. We do pay tuition for the, the Middletown BOE program, so there is a tuition fee that we have to pay. We also have some students at other magnets and charter schools, and the law basically says is if students are interested, they apply and they're accepted, then the town needs to pay the tuition cost for those students. So this is a line item, actually the BOAG magnet tuition, because we have such a wonderful high school. We've had fewer students leaving district. The trending is downward, so we're able to save a little bit in that line, but we have one additional student that we have to budget for next year out of district. So the reduction in the BOAG magnet offsets that increase in the out of district, but it's still an $89,000 increase. And now, the good news. We do have objects that are decreasing, some of them as a result of Pierson closing, and some of them as a result of some hard work that we've done really looking at our budget lines. So these, I don't have as many slides, they're a little more straightforward. The first one is our non-certified salaries. You can see that in the table. It's down $245,000, just a little more than that. And that really is offsetting some of the increase in the certified salaries, which is why our salary portion of increase is much smaller. Again, this includes all contracted increases, but it does represent 7 positions that are being reduced related to the closure of Pierson primarily, but also in closing Pierson and restructuring some of our support service and paraeducators. We're able to reduce a couple of other things. So these 7 positions are mostly the support staff, secretaries, a couple of paras, some food service reductions. We have those outlined. So these are the other major object decreases, and it just gives you a little rationale of why. So as you go down, you see one that says public utilities, going down 77,437. That truly is for electricity cost savings. And then as we go through each of those, I don't have to read them all to you, but it gives you a little bit of background on why those are going down, where they are showing in the table. So with all of those adjustments, where we stand right now is this 1.7% increase. And the caveat, again, is that idea that we're hopeful we'll have some additional decreases to share with you soon related to the health insurance cost, which makes up the bulk of this. Before I close, I just want to review through all of this and summarize a little bit of what this budget represents in terms of investments with our switching. They don't all cost anything. They have to do with reorganization. But what we are doing to invest and adapt and adjust to our strategic plan that we've laid out. So these are at each of the schools some of the investments. You've heard about the math program. We are looking at reallocating resources for the grade level leadership at Joel, where we would have some teacher leadership to work and develop the implementation of both our math programming and our new science programming. Elliott, you see the new math program. We've restored the after hours program, and now we have 5th grade over there, so they'll have those opportunities as well. I mentioned the math at Morgan, the new position I talked about. In maintenance, we are implementing, it's $4,000 or $4,500 in year 1, and then about $2,500 after, but we're looking at managing our information and our reporting to become even more efficient. Right now, we use like a Google Sheet, and everybody puts it into that Google Sheet, and we sort it, and that's how we track our tickets and our reports and what we've accomplished. It's becoming very cumbersome, and so there's a slight investment there. One of the things that has been, since I've gotten here, work that we've done as board is our talented and gifted programming. And our instruction subcommittee, headed by Erica, and our assistant superintendent, Marco Famigletti, they have been working with parents and looking at our talented and gifted programming. And we are reallocating resources, so it's not a new investment, but we're reallocating resources to create a coordinator position that can liaison with parents and help drive forward some programming improvements. I mentioned the curriculum process development and writing, and you saw a dollar amount. That really is related to our NEASC accreditation at the high school, as well as the codifying of the work that teachers do at every grade level throughout the district. And then we have a paperless registration software for athletics that's in the district-wide. We rolled out and piloted it at Morgan. We're looking to expand it at Elliott. And then you can see we're adding an Elliott cross-country coach. We've had huge numbers in that program. It's about $2,000 for the stipend, but we have high participation with 5th grade coming over. We're hopeful they'll be able to participate as well. So we really do need to, for student safety and support, we need to have that position. Budget adjustments. So this slide really gives you a summary of the staffing reductions as a whole in the district. And then the operational savings, and you have the detail of that in the budget book. And then the new bid for photocopy costs, it's in several spots, but it's, at this point, I think it's about $25,000 or $26,000 in savings based on the new bid. So that's our operating, and I just want to share, I think it's 2 slides, maybe 3, on our capital budget. So I know you've seen it, I think, and Minor has presented to the boards. But I do want to share with you that just like all of this is kind of ongoing work. And as we really evaluated our transition needs, our capital budget request was done in November. And we have then established our transition needs and found that there were 2 things that we could take out of our capital request. So we wanted to tonight, the Board of Ed approved it Monday night at their meeting. So we are proposing a reduction of $75,000 from the original request. And I do have the paper there. I don't know if you need it, Mary, or if you have it. The reduction is in the Joel playground upgrades and the potential move of elements that we can work with the playground we have now that we've worked through our schedule and we know what the programming is. There's no need to add elements or to move the Pierson playground for school purposes. So that was a $60,000 item request, and we're zeroing that out. And then the other one was for remote systems monitoring at Joel to manage the HVAC system remotely and hopefully prevent some of the pipe bursts we've had. Gonzalo Carrion, our director of maintenance, has explored it, and really, we believe through Eversource and some rebate programs, we can accomplish this at very minimal cost to the district. It will involve some LED lighting upgrades, which we've been looking to do anyway, but then these other pieces could be part of the process at no cost to the board or the town. So we removed that $15,000 request, and so our overall adjusted request for capital is $554,021. And And this does give you kind of a breakdown. I know the budget book, there's a page in the budget book under district information that has our capital request, it has the trending, and it gives you pretty much the same detail of what the requests are for.
Mary Ann, what was your adjusted capital number?
The new number is 554,021 from the
Oh, I
111.
see,
So
okay,
we,
all right.
the approved from capital was 629, and the adjusted, if I did the math right, is 554, sorry. So our approach has been, we budget to the point of everything we know and all the detail we can get to have the best budget coming forward. We are charged to do that, to maintain our schools, to offer the quality programming, but our approach has been, we budget to the best of our ability a year and a half in advance. But if we know we don't need money for something, we're going to put it back on the table. And then we know that the process is moving forward, and the hard part is now. And so we are here as partners. And I just, before we get to questions, I need to say thank you to the wonderful people who work for the Clinton Public Schools. I can't do this, and we can't operate the way we do as a really strong school system and as a quality board without the support of our teachers, our support staff in our buildings, our administrators and directors. Our central office staff and business office staff, if you look at the detail that's in this budget book and the trend information, are critical in being able to provide that to all of you and keep me sane as we go through year after year of really providing what is our passion. And that's quality experiences to the youth here at Clinton so that they have a chance to explore and develop themselves and have opportunities to become who they're meant to be. Even if they don't know what it is right now, it's our job to help get them there so they can be successful. So I definitely have to end by thanking the Board of Education and the work that they do. It's hard work, it's a lot of hours, just as you guys understand. And it's a great partnership, and their passion for our students is remarkable and much appreciated. And I'm proud to be the superintendent and to work with them. So now I will open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, Mary Ann, for walking us through this process, the detail and transparency that you provided. And Erica, we appreciate that you shared with the successes of the program and what's going on. So we will start with questions.
This video provided as a public service by Kirk Carr, the Kirkster. Thank you for watching.